It's a rare occasion for me.
So how long are you going to be going on vacation? That's good.
Those are quicker stories like that.
Yeah. They don't have to cut anything short.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Life's too short. Take the vacation. I mean, really,
Hey, Ryan. Very nice to meet you.
besides, the other business over there, they already declared they're not doing another damn thing else the
Right.
year.
I mean, there really is nothing else that's really happening. I mean, market's happening all the time.
Right.
I think Secura's going to start,
It's not like anything goes in.
say something for a minute or two. I'm going to get up and read something for about 3.5 minutes. I'll introduce you, and then I'll let you introduce them.
Do you like a signal or anything like that? You need close to 2 or you check the watch? Okay.
Good stuff.
Are we doing today's extra meeting?
So, Lily, how long are you staying in town?
Just till tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Had more time to sightsee.
Yeah, we did. I think it's 20 minutes. So first your plan program, then if you want to field questions from the audience. I don't
So why don't you give them
20 minutes. Yeah, that sounds good.
What's the protocol? Left side or right side?
Yeah.
I always put it over.
Right, left? Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? I gotta change it.
Let's give it maybe another 5 minutes. So Ryan's on the way.
Yeah, it's just so hard. I know in high school, I was reading an article and there's like someone who's doing it in New York State because it's so difficult to get into the CSU organization. So I'm just like,
And you said you're from LA, and I'm guessing since the population is so dense there, it makes it that much harder. It's like that when you're up in Northern Virginia, when Virginia State's close to.
and then it's also like there's so many like amazing so it's like you have to be
Well, it's exciting to think about doing all that. My girls are 4th and 5th grade, so it's a few more years off, but I've got friends that are doing college searches right now, and it just seems so exciting. Sounds good.
Everybody else is going to go a good swimming in the hip jackets huddle. Put on their look whole facing you because I'll be trying to talk to you. Sure. Okay, so that's how it happened laid out.
Sounds good. I'm here, I guess, is the idea.
Yeah. Excellent. Hey, check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. Hey, test, test. Good. Okay. And right now I do have the lavs up, the wired lavs on stage up, so you should hear some. Yeah, they should be about this equal. Hey, test, test. Yeah, I'll walk up and give you a little check. Hey, test, test. Hey, check, check, check. Sound that up? Hey, check, check, check. Okay. Test, test, test. 1 2. Check, check. Check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. Test, test, test. 1 2 1 2. Check, check. Hey, check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. Test, test. A little low. Okay. Actually, I don't think I have full blast. Hey, check, check, check. 1 2. All right.
Yes, we do. I'm just gonna send this quick.
Hi, everyone. Ooh, this is off. Okay. I'm just letting you know we're going to start in about 2 minutes. So just to give you a heads up. Thank you. and then this is Ryan. No. Mm-mm. Oh, there's an extra. Okay. Yeah, he's gonna say no.
So Dennis, you're the first chair there.
Okay.
Is there a mic on this chair?
There isn't one on this.
There's not a mic on this chair, so you might
We just switch.
want to more pull.
The moderator is already wired up. Where is he?
Oh, he's right here. He's wired. Oh, okay, cool. All right, good. Then we have an extra chair. We don't need. So we have one extra chair.
Never crossed my mind.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Sakira Cook, Senior Counsel at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and the Leadership Conference Education Fund. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today for a roundtable to discuss challenges of reentry, the economic benefits of hiring people with records, and how you can think about covering these issues in your work. The Leadership Conference, this event is the first in a series of events that the Leadership Conference will be hosting for this month, for April, which is Second Chance Month. This is one of the most important issues that we believe facing America in the 21st century. Hundreds of thousands of individuals return to community each year from state and federal prisons. Even after they have served their time, these individuals face numerous obstacles to reintegrating back into society, whether it's finding access to housing, education, employment, or public benefits. It is great to have partners like Prison Fellowship in our work to reform the justice system. I want to thank James Ackerman, Jim Forbes, and Heather Rice-Minus for partnering with us on this important event. And their commitment to the work of justice reform. It is our belief that every person in America deserves a second chance and is worthy of us reaffirming their dignity and their potential. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sierra. I'm James Ackerman, the President and Chief Executive Officer, and I'd like to welcome you. Good afternoon. We're honored to co-host today's briefing with Sakira and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. When Prison Fellowship decided to launch Second Chance Month last year, we partnered with 60 organizations to convince the United States Senate to declare April Second Chance Month in 2017. Boy, get that out. And we were absolutely overwhelmed by the positive reception that we had from our partners. But groups like the Leadership Conference were already deeply engaged in changing the narrative about how our nation views the value and potential of people with a criminal record. It is exciting to see the movement growing. As of today, we have over 130 organizations signed up as official partners on Second Chance Month. A full list is included in your folders. This diverse coalition is proof that second chances for those who have paid their debt to society is a concept everyone can embrace, from the furthest left to the furthest right. Second Chance Month has also inspired policymakers across the country. Several proclamations and resolutions have already been issued in D.C., Minneapolis, St. Paul, Michigan, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. And just last week, Senator Rob Portman from Ohio and Congressman Tony Cardenas from California introduced bipartisan resolutions to declare April as Second Chance Month. We are looking forward to pushing for passage in Congress and for many more states to follow suit this April. At Prison Fellowship, we are in the business of second chances. We offer programming in 428 prisons across the country. Every day, we walk shoulder to shoulder with incarcerated men and women, helping them to step into the purpose and plan that God has for their lives, and to provide guidance and instruction on how to become more productive and healthy citizens. Nearly 700,000 men and women will return to our communities this year alone. Thus, it is smart on crime for us to implement a more restorative approach to criminal justice, reentry, and in particular, employment for people with a criminal record. We have available for you a small book called Inside Voices of Prison Fellowship, which you can retrieve at the front desk, at the desk where you checked in when you leave, if you'd like a copy. This book features stories of numerous Prison Fellowship staffers who have all spent a meaningful amount of time in prison themselves. In the tradition of our founder, the late Chuck Colson, we're proud that today a full 25% of our field staff are people who were once caught up in the cycle of crime and incarceration, but today are now part of the cycle of renewal. Returning citizens have a lot to offer employers, not only to nonprofits involved in direct ministry like Prison Fellowship, but to trades, manufacturing, retail, service industries, the sciences, academia, the arts, and yes, public service. Unfortunately, too often, the 65 million Americans with a criminal record are relegated to the margins of society due to the second prison, the barriers that prevent them from getting an education, voting, securing housing, and finding gainful employment. Today, we have a terrific panel of experts who are going to unpack these issues for you. To this end, I'll turn over to our moderator, the senior justice reporter with the Huffington Post, Ryan Reilly. Ryan, all yours.
Great, thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I think, to start off with, we got a great panel here, so maybe if we could just go down the lines here and sort of just briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background so people can find out a little bit more about you. So, Dennis?
My name is Dennis Avila from Denver, Colorado. I own a small business, small roofing company, started a nonprofit called Heat Incorporated, which we work in the city in Denver, Colorado with at-risk youth, young adults, and we're able to go into schools, get out in the community, go into detention centers, even adult prison, and mentor people. And it's all based around music, so it's pretty awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. And my name is Lily Gonzalez, and I am formerly incarcerated. I was sentenced to 4 years in prison. I completed 2, of which were in solitary confinement. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, my 16-year-old, which is here in the front, and a 5-year-old that I have at home. After my release, I went to Homeboy Industries, an organization you may have heard of, and I ended up being the first homegirl to graduate with a bachelor's degree, and I'm currently in graduate school.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Morozek. I'm the Chief Talent Officer for Butterball Farms, which is located in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we've been hiring returning citizens for 23 years. We've had tons of success with it, and we're sharing information with other companies about the success we've had and how we've gone about doing that. So I really believe strongly in second chances. It's the right thing for companies, for the individuals in the community.
And my name is Judy Conti. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the National Employment Law Project. NELP is a nonprofit organization that advocates on behalf of low-wage and unemployed workers. And in particular, we work very hard to remove unreasonable barriers that people face to getting good jobs. And that takes many forms and in many types of industries and for many different people, but in particular, dealing with formerly incarcerated and people with criminal records, we want to make sure that people's past isn't held against them in unreasonable and unfair ways, because we all do better when we all do better.
Great. I guess since it's a reporters roundtable, I was sort of curious if maybe each of you could elaborate on what you think maybe are some of the misconceptions or frustrations you have when reading media reporting, or maybe misconceptions that the public has about re-entering citizens.
I'm going to just push back a little bit on that. When we say re-entering citizens, not everybody that's formerly incarcerated has citizenship. So to say a returning citizen, we should find a different term, because there's also detention camps. One thing that I found personally within the media, it's when covering such stories, it's either to sensationalize or further dehumanize you. It's there's really no in between. It's like, look at Lily, she pulled herself up from the bootstraps. This is the land of opportunity. America's great. Or to say, look at this person, they have a record and this is why they're bad. So there's no in between.
Yeah. It's not as black and white, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say too, it would be really refreshing to see positive articles about how people have been successful after returning. There are so many success stories, but you don't hear them. And so that would be really good. We do hear, and it's always held against the person, it seems, no matter what happens when they're in the media. So an example would be, we had one of our employees who was killed, and he wasn't doing anything wrong at the time, but what was brought up in that was not only that he was killed, but that he had a felony conviction, which had nothing to do with it, so not bringing that up. I think another thing is that individuals don't really understand the terms, but they make judgments based on them. So what is a felony? What is a violent felony? Most people do not know that, but they make judgments. It sounds scary, and so I don't want to participate with it.
I think the language that is used is very important as well. And when you see reporters go out of their way to use humanizing language to talk about people who were formerly incarcerated, people with criminal records, there's a different tone that the article takes, and it welcomes the reader in a different way, as opposed to an article that talks about the ex-con, the felon, reducing a human being to perhaps the one biggest mistake of their entire life, instead of really coming at it from the point of view of their humanity first and foremost. So I would certainly encourage reporters everywhere to really look into using more humanizing language.
Bonnie, in terms of hiring, I guess you were talking a little bit about how obviously when someone hears felony, they think of the serious thing. How do you, as an employer, how would you make distinctions between depending on what sort of crimes people have committed and who's going to be an acceptable employer for you? Just tell us a little bit about that decision-making process.
Sure. So quite some time ago, we banned the box, and I think that should be required, really, because I think when you have the box on the application, you're asking the person, tell me about the worst thing you've ever done in your life, and then as a recruiter, I'm going to judge you based on that. I wouldn't ask anyone that, and I don't need to know that at that point in the process. I need to know, are you a fit for my company? Do you have the skills I'm looking for? And later I want to know. So I think that would be really important. We also really seek to understand circumstances and what's happened in an individual's past rather than judging on a conviction. Convictions are very misleading because they mean lots of different things. So I think if you follow the EEOC guidance and truly make decisions on a case-by-case basis, that's the way to do it.
Dennis, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like for you re-entering and sort of trying to get back into an employment situation?
Ooh, very tough. Very, very tough. So I think there's a stigma that anyone who's been to prison is a scary, evil person, which is not true. I mean, I've met some, in prison, I've attorneys, several people with degrees who've master's degrees. You find people from every walk of life in prison that have not done horrific things, but they've broken the law to the extent that the punishment was for them to spend time in prison. So, you know, myself, I've got convictions that involve drugs and firearms. So if you haven't met me, if you haven't had a chance to talk to me and you know, get to know who I am, if you just look at, like some of the other panelists have said, some of the worst things that I've done, you would think I'm this crazy person, you know, which isn't true at all. But these are some of the things that I got in trouble for, and coming out of prison, trying to get a job, a job that's going to sustain me and my family was really, really hard. So, you know, since then I've been able to learn some really good trades. I've always been a person that has been able to get through some pretty tough stuff, and I've learned some really good trades, started a company of my own once I saw the opportunity present itself. So, but up until that point, I've had a few different jobs. I've been turned down for several jobs because of my record, so it's been tough.
So it's tough to get past that initial hurdle.
Tough to get past that initial hurdle, very tough.
Yeah. Lily, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the education system and how you felt like, you know, it either prepares people or doesn't prepare people for life on the outside.
Well, I ended up in higher education completely by accident. It was not like I came home and I said, I want to go get a master's degree. And when I came home, I also didn't know about terminology, like saying ex-con, felon, or anything like that. And I do think that knowing the difference in language does come from a position of some kind of privilege or analysis that at the time when I came home, I didn't initially have. So like I mentioned earlier, I went to Homeboy Industries, and when I was there, I started off doing maintenance and washing windows, scrubbing toilets. And then from there, I went to work in the office, and then I ended up in the cafe chopping chilies. And I was like, this is not what I want to do. I do not want to chop, nothing against people that chop chilies, but it just wasn't my calling. So then from there, I took this class called Pathways to College at Homeboy Industries, and I applied to Cal State Northridge. I was accepted. I didn't know that I was accepted because I kept coming home and checking my mailbox, not knowing to check my email address. So then, and it was there that I was like, do I want to chop chilies or do I want to go to school? And I was like, well, I'll go to school. And once I did that, I found myself with a completely different set of challenges. Initially, I was not granted financial aid because when I was arrested, I was a student at Cal State Northridge. So I completely flunked out of college because I was in jail. So I had to appeal that process. The school still denied that. So then I just sent an email to everyone and was like, I'm trying to come to school, like, please help me, in other words. And from there, the director of financial aid said, I'm kind of wavering. She sounds like she may be lying, but since I'm wavering, I'm gonna side with the student. And it's like, why would I lie about going to prison? And if you're wavering, that means my story was really good, so you should just give me the financial aid based on that. But yeah, it was really difficult. I didn't know about logging on to the campus Wi-Fi. I didn't know that you could do that. I remember still like connecting my computer and only having Wi-Fi like at home, not like in public buildings. So that was a challenge, learning how to do certain things academically, having to navigate that whole system when, like I mentioned, I was in solitary confinement. So it wasn't easy for me to advocate for myself. I didn't know how to navigate that. And also to say that, you know, education is the one-all save-all is completely wrong, because I found myself, you know, at the point of graduating with my bachelor's degree and no one willing to hire me. So to the point where I even applied to a position on campus and I was denied because of my background. So you're gonna support my presence on this campus, but you're not gonna hire me and help me get out of this debt that I'm in so I can attend here. So those are some of the, you know, also challenges within higher education, is that they're supportive and, you know, they wanna blast me on the school paper and say, yay, Lily, but we're just not gonna give you a job.
Do you think, I guess for both of you, do you think that when people maybe plead guilty to a felony, they recognize the sort of lifelong consequences that that could have for them for life?
Well, I think you're in a different mindset at the time that you're looking at prison time. So you're not really thinking of you're not thinking of life after prison at that point. You're just thinking of, man, I'm going to prison. How did I end up here? So that doesn't come into play until you're trying to get your life back. It's time to re-enter society and to try to make good for yourself, for your family. I had a son when I went in that was just 4 years old when I went in, and to come out and to want to take care of him and do good myself. Yeah, it's tough, but you don't think about it until you're actually in it, and then you're trying to survive and overcome these hurdles at the same time. So it's tough.
And I think that's why also bail reform is really important, because we have people that are facing all of this time, that are incarcerated, that can't afford to post bail, that are, worried about losing employment, and have all of these different layers, and you're there, and so you end up taking the deal. Like, the facts don't matter. It's just, how can I get home as quickly as possible to not make the situation be worse? And then once you come home, then you're like, oh damn, I have this felony, and so what do I do now? And I was completely unaware of what that F meant.
Yeah. Judy, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about sort of where you think reentry stands, I guess, in the Trump administration, in the Trump era, and where things sort of stand nationally, and is it more of a state-by-state issue at this point?
Generally speaking, reform happens on a state level first, and when the federal government, when Congress sees how well things actually work in the states, then it elevates to the federal level. So there's just a lot of great stuff going on at the state level. As Bonnie talked about, so many states and localities have passed ban the box legislation, whether for public employment, for government contract employment, or even for private employment. And what the ban the box movement does is postpones inquiries of criminal records until later in a process. It's not right on the application. It's after an employer gets to know somebody and determines, yes, they are qualified, and there's something about this person that I like. And when they have already made that type of initial investment, they're much more willing to hear the story and to understand the myriad of complicated situations that probably led someone to a moment where they did something that resulted in incarceration. And in the states and localities where there's been some evaluation of ban the box programs, we see that there's about a 40% increase in people with records getting hired as a result of simply postponing the inquiry about their record. So there's still more jurisdictions where we can spread that, and certainly we would love to see that on the federal level as well, for fully for all federal employment, all federal contract employment. But beyond that, we're also really seeing a lot of movement at the state level around licensing reform. There are so many occupational licenses that exist out there, and many licenses and many restrictions exist for consumer protection, for worker health and safety issues, and I'm not up here saying that all licensing is bad, but as with almost anything, sometimes things get out of hand, if you will, and get way too restrictive. There are some states that you could trace 70, 80 different restrictions that people with records are going to have in terms of being able to get jobs. So we've seen some really exciting left-right coalitions forming around licensing reform in states. And again, to remove those unreasonable barriers. I give you one example. There's so many prisons will train women and men in barbering or cosmetology skills, which are great pathways to fairly sustainable careers for people. Yet there are so many states that won't let you get the barbering or the cosmetology license if you've been convicted of a felony. So there are states that are training their own residents in these skills to go out into a state that won't let them become licensed in that skill that they've been trained. So we really see that this licensing reform is one of the next great steps. We hope to see some movement on that on the federal level soon. And the last thing I would say is that we want to see more and more reform around background checks in general. State databases are pretty sloppy and inaccurate to begin with, and the federal one is even worse. So we want to make sure that whenever there is an opportunity to do background checking using criminal records databases, whether maintained by a state, a locality, or the federal government, that there are adequate procedures that also make sure that those records are correct and give the people who are being checked and are trying to find suitable employment the ability to go in and make sure the records are corrected if they're not right. Because nobody should be denied a job based on the sloppiness of a government database.
Bonnie, maybe you could tell us a little bit about talking to other employers about, I think you talked about maybe trying to place some of your employees at other locations.
Sure. Several years ago, we automated part of our facility, and so that was going to result in the elimination of 80 positions. So we connected with other employers to try to help our employees who are going to be losing their positions find new opportunities. And during that time, we reached out to employers and we asked them a bunch of questions, including, will you hire somebody who's been convicted of a felony? And almost all the employers we reached out to said, no, we will not. And that was crazy to us, because we're like, we know that they're among our most successful employees. They're super engaged. We've had so much success giving chances, and we can't believe that other companies are not doing that. So we created a program called 32-2 with the goal of getting 30 companies to hire 2 returning people and to track them for a period of 2 years. So to build the business case, we had our own information. We know that we have lower turnover, higher tenure with returning than the rest of our population. And so we did that, and through partnering with some nonprofits and through staffing agencies and individual employers, we were able to track data for 479 companies who hired over 1,700 people during that time, and all 479 companies continue to hire. So it's not a phenomenon that's special or unique to Butterball. Everyone is having the same exact response. It's good for business. We've started another 2-year period of collecting data because we thought it might be more impactful, and we learned as we went along that if we collected comparative data rather than just are you still employed. And so we're about a year into that 2nd-year period, and the turnover for non-returning is 22% on an overall basis for 300 and some companies, and it's 12% for returning. So everyone's having lower turnover with returning.
Lily, you sort of mentioned the extremes in a lot of the stories that you hear in the media. Is there a more representative or more mixed or more sort of gray area story that you would be comfortable sharing when you've worked with?
Well, I can speak, about my own experience, and I think that we don't talk about what it's really like for like interpersonal relationships and what that's like, and why I want to sit in the back of the restaurant where I'm facing the door. I don't know if you do that too. So, y'all do that. Yep. So, and it's I do that for certain reasons, or just certain behaviors that I have that are very like low key that no one can really see, but we see each other. And I think the way to kind of do that is kind of like putting your money where your mouth is like hiring reporters and journalists that have this experience, because like we have sports commentators that are, a lot of them are former athletes, right? And they're like experts in the field. Like, why don't we pass the mic and say, why don't you tell the story as best as you can? And looking into doing that instead of getting hung up on, well, what's the right language? Well, why don't you give me a job so I could tell you? Because that's really what it's going to take is, to build like social capital, to I want to take a vacation with my kid and order guacamole when I buy tacos, it's expensive. So how do we do that? So it's like start hiring folks and having them really be at the table when they're being represented. That's what I think, and I'm very grateful to be here and talk about the importance of language, because it is important. But also, let's not place value on people's lives on how well they ascribe to U.S. social norms instead of actually giving them opportunities, not necessarily chances, but opportunities, because a chance is kind of like playing the lotto. You don't know.
Yeah, definitely some great points there. I think we're going to maybe turn to questions in a few minutes, but before we did that, I'm going to use the question that I always have in my back pocket that actually always works out for the best for me as a reporter at the end is, what question should I have asked? What do you want to be asked about? End up with some of the best stuff that way. So let's try it out here. What do you guys want to talk about? What question?
Is orange
what's
really the new black?
Is orange really? There you go. I mean, I don't know. I thought the earlier seasons were pretty solid. I don't know. It's trended off a little bit recently.
Like, I'm trying to make my peace with that color.
What's your thought on that show and other perceptions of?
I think it was great. It started a conversation,
Yeah.
right? But I also want to say that this is someone that came from a position of privilege, right? Lots of women of color and people of color have been incarcerated at enormous rates for the drug on war, the war on drugs, the war on poverty. And where's their reality show, or where's their Orange is the New Black, or where's their Netflix series? We don't have that. So, this came from a white woman with a position of power, and she used her privilege to create a conversation, but let's also not, ignore that fact as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's had an impact on when you talk to, you're out in the world?
Yeah, people ask, like, is it really like that? Mm. And it's, I think in one of the seasons, the solitary confinement scenes, those for me were very real. Mm-hmm. I couldn't watch those. That part was probably the only real, for in my experience, that was very real to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
About yourself, what do you sort of think of the media perceptions of, or portrayals in Hollywood of prison?
Oh, it's unrealistic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, before going to prison, I hadn't done a lot of jail time. So, I sold drugs for almost 10 years and was able to manipulate and maneuver without getting caught. So I hadn't been in jail for more than a night. If I went to jail for something petty, I'm out. I got out immediately. So only thing most people have to go off of is what they see in the media of what prison might be like, unless they have a family member or someone who's close to them that has been in prison. And then still, you don't really get to know unless you're living in prison or been to prison. But they do portray some things pretty closely, but like she was saying, she couldn't watch the solitary, the solitary scenes and things like that. But a lot of it is a bit embellished. It wasn't what I expected, that's for sure. Yeah.
They don't talk about the dehumanizing component, every single time that you go to court and you leave the facility and you come back, you're strip searched, and full strip search, bend over and cough. That's really dehumanizing. I saw my daughter through a glass for 2 years. I couldn't touch her. And when I would come see her to visit, I was completely waist chained, cuffed. And every time I was transported inside a county bus. But within the bus, there was a cage that they would throw me in aside. So it's you're already on the bus that's caged and blocked out and all that stuff. But then within that, you're at it, I was thrown into this separate little cage, and I'm waist chained, and the way that you're treated is very disrespectful. It is a very dehumanizing experience. You have absolutely nothing coming to you. I had no concept of time, weather, or anything like that, and no TV, no anything. Our library was a milk crate on the floor with James Patterson and Nora Roberts. No offense, but it was not my thing. But that was it. So it's that has to have an impact. There's studies that show that after 15 days of solitary confinement, there's severe impacts on the brain. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing beyond talking about this to actually help? And that's what when we talk about this, where do we go when we come home? Yeah.
I mean, if there's one thing that you could change about how prisons operate, if you could suddenly say, this is changing, king for a day, what would you?
Well, I'm an abolitionist.
Right.
So I'm just going to say that. Yeah.
I'd say one of the main things I'd say, let's set it up so that there's not a single person, individual, corporation, profiting from prisons, period. That's a big problem. So, of course, if I put myself in someone's shoes who is profiting, I'm going to do what I can to make sure people keep going through the prison system so that I can continue to make money. And a correctional system, it is not. They need to change that as well. It's not correcting anyone. Was it enough for me to not go back? Absolutely. But I had my mind made up before I even hit the actual first prison they sent me to. So you go into a DRDC, which is a diagnostic and receptionist center where they do all these tests on you. And that was something else. I didn't know that even existed. So you're going to test me to see how smart I am, to see how healthy I am before you send me to a prison. Like that whole concept right there just blew my mind. So,
And it's to see what job you're going to get, like in prison, for like 2 cents an hour. You know?
I think it was 61 cents a day when I was there, something like that. But at any rate, I don't see, it isn't genuinely set up to retrain people in their thinking so that they make different decisions. And it's basically people, a lot of it is a waste of time, a waste of tax money. I could see a lot of tax dollars just going down the tubes from day one. And I think a lot of people, if they could spend even just a week inside to see what inmates do and what is set up for them, what programs are set up for them so that they don't recommit crimes and go back in. The general public would be appalled. There's not much there for people. So
Yeah. Last thing, just Bonnie or Judy, anything I should have asked you or anything you want to add?
I would just say, let the past be the past. None of us would want to be judged on the worst things we've done. We wouldn't want it out there. So let's not do it to anybody. Let's talk about from here forward.
And ask people what they have to offer. All of us have talked about dehumanizing, and Lily put such a good point on it about all of the things that are done to strip somebody of truly their very humanity. People in the press have a real opportunity to help restore that. So ask people, what do you have to offer? What do you want the world to know about you? And tell their stories.
Great. Well, thanks so much to everyone here. I really appreciate you guys being here. And let's open it up to some questions from the audience here. If you could just identify yourself and your outlet if you have a question. Any?
Pretty close. Okay, got it. Hi, Sarah Chaco with the Wall Street Journal. I wanted to ask about the support that's come behind this movement. You talk about it gaining more support, and I was wondering if there was an aha moment for people or some sort of catalyst like that brought, other than it's a good idea that people should get behind, was there something else that sort of brought people to this?
I think there are different catalysts and different ahas for different people. I think some folks who are, small government libertarians looked at how much money we're pumping into our criminal justice system only to make things worse instead of better, and realized that that wasn't working. And if they really want to be a small government libertarian, this is not the way of going about doing it. I think a lot of people who come from evangelical backgrounds realize that if you truly believe in the words of Christ and about rehabilitation and forgiveness, that we can't continue to operate such a deeply punitive system. I think people who have always been inclined to look at civil rights as one of their prime motivators look at the past 30, 40 years of our failed war on drugs and war on crime, and again realize that we've not made the world any safer. We've only decimated communities and families in the process. So I think there's different aha moments for different people, depending on sort of what's that thing that drives your policy decisions. But the fact of the matter is that when you've got such a failed policy that on all of those different levels, it resonates with people and brings such strange bedfellows all to the same table, then you're on the right track and you're doing the right thing to try to reform that system.
One trend I've sort of noticed is that it seems like any politician who ever goes to prison immediately after their release becomes an advocate, a strong advocate for prison reform. So that's
Yeah, it's like you didn't believe it was bad when we told you it was bad.
Right.
it's one potential strategy for enacting this. Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm Andrew Basone from PBS NewsHour. Just wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about what life is like on the inside of prisons and what changes you think need to be done. Some people say when you get incarcerated, that kind of teaches you how to become a better criminal, and a lot of people get in a worse situation because they're locked up. So what are some of the changes you think need to happen to make people improve their lives and come out and join society so that they can contribute?
I will say that it doesn't necessarily make you a better criminal, but you come home and you realize all the barriers that you have to employment, so therefore you have to find other ways to survive. And that's what prison is about, and that's what coming home is about, and it's survival. In there, like you stated, there is absolutely nothing to rehabilitate, nothing to assist, nothing, no tools, absolutely nothing. So you've got nothing coming to you when you're there, and then when you come home, you have that same experience on different levels.
Well, I got in trouble before I went to prison. I got in a little bit of trouble that kind of it did push me further into selling drugs. So I got caught with a little bit of I got caught with some drugs in my vehicle, and I got a slap on the hand. They ended up sending me to a halfway house, which I was right back in the community immediately. But all that did was put me around other criminals that are coming fresh out of prison, that were higher up on the chain, if you will, of selling drugs, and I worked my way up that way. So I met some other guys that could get me deeper in, and I could make a lot more money, and I didn't take that slap on the hand seriously at all. So, there's so many things that they could change with prison. There's a lot of. It's very easy for you just to do your time. Very easy for you to just do your time, not learn a single thing, and get out. And I think that's probably part of the reason why we have high recidivism rates, part of a reason why we have high recidivism rates. But, there's just a long list of changes that could be made. Like I said before, no one should be profiting off of prisons. That shouldn't even be allowed, period, in any way, shape, or form. There's different ways we could set it up where just no one profits off of prisons. If we can do all of these other things in our world, accomplish all these other things in our world, we could set that up. And I think that would first help with looking at individuals. I think people who go through prison now, it's almost as if I felt like I was a number, like cattle.
Like a FedEx package.
Exactly.
Like you have a wristband and they scan you. And then I saw this commercial like FedEx, the world's on time. And they just like scan you and it's like this is where your package is. And that's what I felt like, a FedEx package.
Yep.
How do you think, I guess, the guards sort of play into this? Because I don't know from your perspective, but one thing that it seems like looking at this from sort of the outside is that in a lot of places, guard salaries are very low, and it's a very difficult job. And the pay isn't great in a lot of places, and often it's a stepping stone on the way to somewhere else. How does that play into it in your mind?
Well, in California, they make very good money.
Right. Yeah.
So we're job security. There was somebody that I know that was incarcerated, and the guard told them, "I bought a boat. Thanks. Come back." So it's job security. And then also, if you look at the requirements that you need to even get into like law enforcement or to get into corrections, it's like you don't need like a bachelor's degree. You don't need any of that. So it's like you're young, you're a kid, and you have a gun and a badge. Like you're give that to any kid, power, a gun and a badge, and it's like, I rule the world. So just put that into the prison system, and that's what it is. And I'm in a position where you're here and I'm here, and I know where I'm at, and I'm going to be treated accordingly.
Yep.
And with that, there's good people and there's bad people, and that's across the board. The fact that you're a guard or whatever, there's good people and then there's bad people, and there's some that made sure I had the minimum requirements met, and there's some that I was allowed an hour out of my cell a day, and I wouldn't even get that. So.
Yeah. I guess like a lot of areas of law enforcement, there's a wide range of pay, as well as skills and experience required and training. Any other questions from the audience?
Hello, my name is Ryan. I'm a UCDC intern. Although Ban the Box is doing great, my question would be, what can we do to push another question in terms of rehabilitation reform, getting rehabilitation certificate or expungement, and getting our crimes not only taken away so we could push forward for jobs, but also get our rights back?
Right. There is actually a new movement of state campaigns as well on the Clean Slate campaign, basically is what it's called. And it's being led by a number of nonprofit organizations on a national level and trying to bring it out to state level. And working on all of those issues to take care of expungement and sealing. When I used to do direct legal services, I probably saw 5 people a week who were arrested and never convicted of anything, but couldn't get a job because those arrest records were just too easily available. And some of them were 15, 20 years old and still hindering people from getting jobs. And there's all sorts of times that people are told, well, if you take this plea deal, you'll serve a little time, or you might have some probation, and then it'll disappear from your record. And things don't really disappear like people are led to believe that they do, and they keep showing up again and again. So I think the Clean Slate project is obviously a very important one, and we would encourage states to move forward with that. I mean, the rehabilitation question is just a huge one. I remember as an idealistic law student when I was taking Criminal Law 101, on the first day, my professor taught us about the 5 different purposes of incarceration, all of which in theory are supposed to be equally important, and rehabilitation was one of those. Now, of course, he quickly told us that that was a fallacy in reality, but I think we need to go back to that. I mean, we shouldn't be putting people away with quite frankly, the express knowledge that we're going to be making it impossible for them to do anything once they're released. We have a moral obligation to each other and as human beings. If people are incarcerated because they didn't have necessary skills to do anything gainful on the outside, then let's take that time and give people that education and give them those skills. If people are incarcerated because of addiction problems that led them to behaviors that were illegal, let's deal with that. I mean, we could talk for hours on end about just the war on drugs and the way that we've criminalized, physical medical addiction. So we really have to, just as when people have served their time and they come out and we have to deal with them on an individualized basis in terms of getting them jobs, when people are incarcerated, we also need to deal with them on an individualized basis and give them the services they need so that when their time is done, they can go out and really start their lives over again.
Judy, who are some of what states are the states to sort of watch in terms of reform in your mind?
It's interesting. With a lot of things, you would say maybe it's the most liberal and progressive states, and let's look at California and New York and Washington State. And that's not the way it is at all in this. There really almost aren't states to watch because it could and it does happen everywhere. There are efforts in Kentucky and Texas and DC and California, so you really see it everywhere. So, I mean, honestly, I think the state to watch is the state that you live in, and find the advocates there and the people who are working to reform the system and work with them to make it happen, because it's possible everywhere.
Any other questions from the audience? We have maybe have time for one more.
I am a former reporter who wrote a lot about this issue, so I
The mic.
apologize.
There you go.
But I wanted to know from you two, what do you tell your peers who also follow you and are released? What sort of tips and pointers do you give them so that they can succeed?
People that I know, I usually navigate them, and I plug them in with people like organizations like Homeboy Industries or the Anti-Recidivism Coalition or A New Way of Life, because like I mentioned earlier, it's really great to exceptionalize and sensationalize Lily, and that's great. However, it really did take a village. There was people that when I didn't have money to pay for my books, paid for my books, and I didn't have money for parking, and those are things that could have made me completely just not continue on the path that I was on. So having like real support was really key. People that were going to advocate for me when I didn't know how to do that for myself, and to just support me when I was having a bad day and something triggered me. You know, I was doing an internship at a school, and it reminded me of a prison, and I didn't want to go finish that internship anymore, and it was going to cost me my grade. But I was able to go back to Homeboy Industries. I was able to connect with my therapist, and I was able to sit down and have a conversation. So everyone that I meet that comes to Homeboy Industries, I tell them, go see a therapist, because that's the last thing I ever wanted to do. And I just told them, like, look, like celebrities have them too now. Like it's cool to have a therapist. So that's definitely my advice.
My wife's a therapist, so I highly endorse therapy. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I still work with a lot of people coming out of prison, so we purposefully look for those opportunities. I actually have a guy staying with me right now, me and my family, that's got out not too long ago. So I just tell them, prepare for a lot of ups and downs and prepare for a lot of hurdles, but don't give up. Don't give up. I had so many hurdles thrown in front of me. One, for instance, this is an example of a system. So I got caught in a small town, a small mountain town. I got to a point where I was delivering drugs all over the state of Colorado, and I got caught in a small mountain town, and they just couldn't stand me. With a passion, they couldn't stand me. They went out of their way. They didn't have to do this. They went out of their way to put my convictions on my driving record. Like they took an extra effort to do that so that when I got out, I couldn't get insurance to drive. They didn't have to do that. But they're like, we're gonna make sure you paid to the fullest. If we could put you under the prison, we would put you there. But so I just tell guys, prepare for a lot of hurdles, but don't give up. You can get past these things. I'm here for you. You know, I've got a lot of people that I work with that are here for you. Whatever we can do to help you, don't give up. Don't give up. There's gonna be days that you wanna just say, forget it, this isn't worth it. It's easier just to go back to prison and go sit down, which some people get used to that life, you know. But yeah, we try to be as supportive as we can, so.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, again. I think we're going to have James come and close us out.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, panel. That was awesome. As we close out, I hope today's discussion has planted some seeds for you that will grow into stories that reflect the dignity and potential of 65 million Americans with criminal records. The very first time I visited a prison in 2004, I was struck by something that should have been obvious to me. These are people. And we need to engage with them in a dignified manner to help them become healthier and more productive citizens. So if you take one thing away, I hope it is the power of language and labels. Lily referred to this a little bit, and actually I'll take that to heart, what you had to say about citizenship, Lily. If you can infuse thoughtful language instead of stigmatizing labels into your writing, you will be affording dignity and hope to those who wish to reclaim their identity as people. Finally, please consider participating in Second Chance Month by referencing it in your outlet's April coverage. There's a full April event list in your folder that was given to you when you arrived. One local event I want to highlight is happening on April 7th in Southeast DC. It is a prayer walk that starts at Anacostia Park and ends at the DC Dream Center, where we'll have a reentry fair with resources for returning citizens. Along the way, we'll hear some amazing stories of second chances. So we hope you will consider joining us on the road to second chances on April 7th. With that said, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to continuing the conversation, and thank you again to the panel. You guys are awesome.